My current work, or the investment banks, well, the motivation behind the investment banking industry to start with was a lot of the rhetoric we were seeing around sort of 1990s, 1991 was how the foreign exchange markets were reacting to so much economic news that was coming out. And you remember the crash in 1992 when sterling, the pound fell out of the exchange rate mechanism. This was a situation whereby I think the United Kingdom said that we're going to well, basically the European countries were aligning, trying to make sure that they aligned their currencies within certain bands. And this is where the EMS, Economic Monetary System, was formed. So if a particular currency floated a little bit above a certain band, it would be sold by traders. If it was too low, it would be bought by traders. But there came a time around 1992 where the sterling was sort of floating on the higher sort of echelon of the higher band against the Deutschmark. And for about 3 or 4 months, our financial experts and our chancellor in the United Kingdom were saying, our exchange rate is where it should be and everything's fine, the economy is fine, but there was no economic reason why the currency should be as high as it was. So the traders, one day on the 16th of September, Wednesday, I remember this very well, they went and sold off sterling and it fell out of the exchange rate mechanism, which was how the currency devaluated. And that allowed, we were in a recession and that allowed our exports to grow and we were able to come out of recession at that time. And I said to myself, you know what, people there are doing a lot of good, they're making a lot of money out of just economic news. I'd like to do that. And this is sort of what sort of transpired me to do that, because I have a lot of economic knowledge. I was in an economics degree at the time. I started to understand how markets move and what happens. I remember during the summer, whilst everybody was on holiday in Greece and sort of sunning themselves up and all this type of thing, I went and bought a book. It was called 10 Times Economics. And this taught me every single thing about how the economy works and how people make money from economics, etc. And I read this book throughout the summer. I went back to my university, went into my I think my second or third year. And every single day I bought the Financial Times. This is a financial newspaper that we have. And I sort of tucked it under my arm. Anytime I had a spare moment, I'll sit down during lunch, I'll read the columns to see how markets move and what happens, etc. And that's how I learned about it. And that's why I got into this field, the investment banking. I think it's just fantastic. If you can sort of make money from economic news, if you know how the markets work, if you know why if the US announced that the Fed are possibly going to cut rates, what's it going to do to bonds or whatever prices there were. So that's how I got into it. And I thought, if I can relate my economic theory to economic practices and what happens in the real world, why can't I just go and make money from this? And that's what I did.
Now, I want to ask a question here, because we're talking about the real world too. With the new administration, the new prime ministers, what do you anticipate, or am I asking the proper question in that context? What is your outlook on the future of how it's going to affect the economies or the pound or the markets? Give me your feedback on that.
Well, I'm hoping that a lot of the rhetoric we've seen from the incumbent, the new prime minister, is that he's going to let enterprise thrive. Because one thing we've had since Brexit was when the United Kingdom exited from the European Union, and there's a lot of uncertainty. There's very little investment for 3 or 4 years because we just couldn't get this deal through. One thing I do hope and I do think that the new prime minister will be to look at businesses. And look at businesses, they are the lifeblood of the country. And to make the economic climate for businesses so sort of attractive that we will get foreign investors. That's something we've really lacked for the last 7 or 8 years, for foreign investors to come in, put their funds into the United Kingdom, get growth, get stimulation going, because they've been talking about growing the economy. Lots of politicians talk all the time about growing the economy, want the economy to grow. The question is, how are you going to do that? And one of the main ways is investment. But if you make the economic climate sort of investable, i.e. people coming from abroad and investing in the United Kingdom, I think that's how the country is going to grow. And I think he's sort of, whether he's the right person to, he probably is right. He's the man who's doing it now, so he's going to do it, I hope. I hope he really does put the UK on the map as far as the investment landscape is going to be, because that's going to be where our economy is going to thrive. I hope also that the sort of the green economy as well, that we're talking about net zero by 2050. That's really important. They're talking about sort of the UK green belt, having wind farms, all that sort of stuff. This is what they're talking about. I hope they will do it. And I hope they'll do it sort of quickly so that we can also rely on our own sort of rather than fossil fuels or sort of importing gas from all these other places, sort of Russia, wherever we import them from. We'll start producing our own. That will reduce the tax burden on people, which will stimulate growth. And then we can go and sort of thrive as an economic powerhouse, if you like, because I think we've fallen down the table a little bit in recent years. And I think we really start climbing back up. And I hope he's the person to do it. It's not going to take one term. I'll say maybe 2 or 3 terms. So that's a term is 5 years. 2 or 3 terms, he might be able to do that. So I think that's what he's going to do. And I hope he does do that.
I'm hoping so too. Let me ask you, so with that in mind, for the common person, the average person, is there any suggestion you have for the from the investment banking side, you're dealing with a lot of high net worth people, but there are a lot of average people. I know in America, a lot of average people invest in the market. We do a lot of mutual funds here. I personally prefer individual stocks. Do you do much Forex trading? What are some suggestions or ideas without going into too much detail that the average person will be looking for going forward?
From an economic standpoint, or from their own sort of investing in stock markets and that type of thing, is that what you mean?
Whatever direction you want to take this.
Right. I think the ordinary person is going to look for less burden on taxation, because I think that the ordinary person, although the threshold for paying sort of the taxes in the United Kingdom has now gone up. I think we're looking to get a lot of people away from sort of a massive tax burden, because the prices in the United Kingdom are far too high. And I think that they are going to be we are hoping that they are going to have a tax burden that's not so pressurized on their finances week to week, because a lot of people are in a lot of trouble. We call it struggle street here. And we shouldn't really, in a country like this, have people on struggle street. So we're hoping that the tax burden will be raised. We're hoping that the public services will be better, so people won't have to sort of pay so much for public services. The government has promised us that we're not going to have such a sort of big tax increases. If there were going to be tax increases, they're going to be taken from probably from what they call windfall taxes on oil companies and that type of thing, and maybe high net worth individuals, etc. So we're and obviously we know that the vast majority of people are ones on the sort of lower tax, and they're the ones who are going to be able to stimulate the economy and start spending again. So I think from their perspective, we're looking for a sort of the threshold and taxation to be raised a little bit more, get a lot more people out. Our goal now is to get more people out of what we call poverty, because there are far too many children in poverty in the United Kingdom, far too many. So we need to get them out of poverty. We need to increase the tax burden. And we need to, reduce the tax burden by increases the amount of tax they pay on a certain amount of income. One problem we also do have in this country is housing. That is a massive, massive problem. 2%, I think they say 2% of the United Kingdom is actually built on. I think some people say maybe as high as 6% of the figures. We're not too sure. But rents in this country are far too high. They're artificially high. And that's because the building projects that have been promised over the last 15, 16 years just haven't happened for one reason or another. And the average person in the street is finding themselves paying humongous rents when they really should not be paying so much rent. If a listing goes into a building that's maybe sort of, 2-bedroom apartment for sort of four people family, they are finding that there are 20 people who are already looking for that listing and willing to pay 30, 40% more for that particular listing. So the rents are going up all the time, and we really can't afford that. So we're looking for the house building, for this new government to make sure that they promise that they when they promise to say they're going to build houses and that kind of thing, make sure they do that. They must do that. We also have a problem here where we have a lot of offices. People now, because of COVID, after COVID, people are working from home. There's a lot of office space that's just not being used. So a lot of these offices can be sort of merged into one sort of center. And why don't we use this office space to create some affordable housing? I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's a really good step, because I drop my children off at school every morning. I take a little bit of a walk to maybe buy a coffee, and I see people lying in the streets. And I think, how on earth do we have that in 2024 in the United Kingdom? That should never be happening. It should never happen, at any point. So I think this government also has a duty to really, really look at the planning laws. We need to look and see how we're going to solve that problem. get people off the streets, get people off struggle street, raise the burden of taxation, start building affordable housing, use some of those offices to put people into housing. And then we'll go on from there. And I think that's how the average person in the street is probably looking at things right now.
You know,